The 7th of July is a famous day here in Kenya. It is usually referred.
Inaitwa Saba Saba. Ni siku muhimu sana katika historia ya taifa letu.
And it refers to the date of July 7, 1990, when thousands of Kenyans took to the streets to demand multi-party democracy and end the dictatorship of the then president. So, what was Saba Saba and why was it important? To understand that, we need to go back a little bit in history. Kenya gained its independence from Britain in 1963, after a long and bloody struggle led by the Mau Mau rebels. The first president of Kenya was Jomo Kenyatta, who ruled the country until his death in 1978. He was succeeded by his vice president, Daniel Arap Moi, who became the second president of Kenya. Daniel inherited a constitution that gave him a lot of power as the president. He also inherited a ruling party, KANU, that dominated the political scene and suppressed any opposition or dissent. He would soon become a dictator who ruled the country with an iron fist. He abolished multi-party politics in 1982 and made KANU the only legal party in the country. He also amended the constitution to give himself more power and to extend his term limit. He controlled the media, the judiciary, the parliament, and the security forces. He used violence, intimidation, corruption, and propaganda to silence his critics and opponents. He also enriched himself and his cronies at the expense of the majority of Kenyans who suffered from poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment. Many Kenyans were unhappy with Moi's rule and wanted change. They wanted more democracy, more freedom, more justice, and more development. They wanted a voice in their own affairs and a say in their own destiny. They wanted a new constitution that would limit the power of the president and guarantee their rights and liberties. They wanted a multi-party system that would allow them to choose their leaders and hold them accountable. But the president was not willing to listen or to reform. He resisted any calls for change and cracked down on any attempts to challenge him. He arrested, tortured, detained, or killed anyone who dared to oppose him or speak out against him. He also rigged elections and manipulated ethnic divisions to stay in power. Now, this is where Saba Saba comes in. Saba Saba was a culmination of a long and courageous struggle by the opposition and civil society to challenge Moi's dictatorship and demand multi-party democracy. They had called for a pro-democracy rally at Kamukunji grounds in Nairobi on July 7, 1990. But Moi was not going to let them have their way. He banned the rally and arrested Matiba, Rubia, and Odinga days before the planned date. He also deployed thousands of police officers and soldiers across the country to prevent any gatherings or protests. But he underestimated the determination and courage of the Kenyan people. Despite the ban and the threats, thousands of Kenyans defied Moi's orders and took to the streets on July 7, 1990. They marched peacefully towards Kamukunji grounds, chanting slogans like "Moi must go" and "No reforms, no elections." They carried placards with messages like "We want democracy now" and "Release our leaders." They wore t-shirts with images of Matiba, Rubia, and Odinga. The police responded with brutal force. They used tear gas, batons, and live bullets to disperse the protesters. They beat up, arrested, or shot anyone they could find on their way. The clashes resulted in at least 39 deaths, 69 injuries, and more than 5,000 arrests across the country. Many of those arrested were tortured and detained without trial. The government also cracked down on the media, civil society, and religious groups that supported the protests. But despite the repression and violence, Saba Saba was a success. It exposed the illegitimacy and unpopularity of Mo's regime and galvanized the opposition and civil society to intensify their pressure for reforms. It also inspired a wave of similar protests in subsequent years, such as the Mo Must Go campaign in 1991, the Lima Declaration in 1992, and the Kamukunji Declaration in 1997. Saba Saba also paved the way for constitutional changes that allowed for multiparty elections in 1992, which ended KANU's monopoly of power. Although Daniel managed to win 2 more terms in 1992 and 1997 amid allegations of rigging and violence, his grip on power was weakened by the emergence of a vibrant opposition and civil society movement. In 2002, Daniel was finally defeated by a coalition of opposition parties led by Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga, ushering in a new era of democratic governance in Kenya.
And other overwhelming evidence is available that Moi has desperately manipulated the Electoral Commission to rig election in his favor in order to declare himself the president, we categorically reject the provisional results of the presidential elections.
Saba Saba is therefore a milestone in Kenya's struggle for democracy and human rights. It is commemorated every year by activists, politicians, and ordinary citizens who continue to demand accountability, justice, and reforms from the government. It is also a reminder of the power and courage of the Kenyan people who risked their lives to fight for their freedom and dignity.
A new chapter in Kenya's history was written today. Hundreds of thousands of people, one of the largest crowds ever seen in Kenya, turned up at Uhuru Park to witness the installation of Mwai Kibaki as president. The man of the moment arrived at exactly 14 minutes to 2 o'clock.
What did you think of our video? Let us know in the comments section below. See you in the next one.